Our scripture reading today, our first scripture reading is from Galatians 5, chapter 5, verse 22 and 23. By contrast, the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, generosity, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. There is no law against such things. Our second reading is from Matthew chapter 21, verses 18 through 22. In the morning, when he returned to the city, he was hungry. And seeing a fig tree by the side of the road, he went to it and found nothing on it at all but leaves. He said to it, "May no fruit ever come from you again." And the fig tree withered at once. When the disciples saw it, they were amazed, saying, "How did the fig tree wither at once?" Jesus answered them, "Truly I tell you, if you have faith and do not doubt, not only will you do what has been done to this fig tree, but even if you say to this mountain, 'Be lifted up and thrown into the sea,' it will be done. Whatever you ask for in prayer with faith, you will receive."
Okay, Pastor. Last week you made a very specific promise to us. You said that during this capital campaign, you weren't going to dangle us over the flames to make us feel guilty to try to give more money. And yet you give us this scripture? Because when you think about it, this is what it sounds like. Tell you what, this is one of those scriptures that pastors don't want to touch with a 10-foot pole, even when it comes up into the lectionary. We would rather tackle one of Paul's women ought not to talk in church ones, you know. Not that I want to do that this morning. What I'm saying, I got to be careful now. But this is crazy because here's what it seems like. This is what this scripture looks like. Jesus is strolling around like he typically does in Galilee, and he gets hungry, needs a snack. He sees a fig tree, doesn't find any fruit, and kills it. I don't know whether Jesus did this or not. He probably didn't, but you know. And that's what it sounds like. Well, first of all, this is not about Jesus having a bad morning. It's not. It's not about him being so hungry that he's angry. What's that term? He's not hangry. This is a classic Jesus teaching moment, acted out in real time. Think about how often Jesus uses farming imagery. He talks about seeds. He talks about vines. He talks about harvesting. Here, the lesson is about the difference between appearance and reality. It's about something that looks healthy on the outside, but isn't actually producing anything life-giving. And some of you might remember, for years we had this silver maple tree in our backyard, and it was great because it provided a lot of shade to the hot end of the house. Well, in fact, when Graham and Sam lived with us with their 3 dogs at the time, they would tease their dog Luna. Luna was kind of the dog that wasn't quite right, so they'd tease her. They'd take her to the back door and they'd say, "Hey, Luna," and she'd cock her head, and one eye would go this way and the other would go the other way. They'd say, "Are you ready to go get the squirrel?" And they'd take that door open, and that dog would bolt out the back door, and like a Michael Jordan thing, it just sailed into the air for so long, and it would hit that tree trying to climb up to get the squirrel that may or may not be there. It was her tree. But over time, that tree started to change. Branches started to die off one by one. Anytime it got windy, inevitably a branch or two would come down. And one spring, a whole section didn't bud. And so we thought, wow, we better call in a tree expert to see what's wrong with this tree. So he comes out to the parsonage, he climbs up in the tree, and he came down with the bad news. He says, "I'm sorry, this tree is going to have to go down. There's no saving it." And I thought, wow, that seems a little extreme. I mean, it still gives shade. It still looks okay, I guess. But I trusted him. And so when they cut that tree down and when it came down, we saw the truth. Because a lot of the branches looked fine, but the trunk was rotten. In fact, it was hollow in some places. What looked strong really wasn't. Maybe that's not the best example, though, because Jesus isn't talking about something that's sick. He's talking about something that looks healthy but produces nothing. So here's a better illustration that involves a person. Mary and I did business with this man for several years. He was a bodybuilder. He was absolutely jacked. Same height as me, same weight as me, but he carried it a little bit different, you know. He was really broad in the shoulders and narrow waist, the kind of guy who probably had to tailor his suits because nothing off the rack would fit right. And he knew everything about nutrition. He knew everything about diet and supplements and what you are and aren't supposed to eat. He was all about discipline and training. But he was also a heroin addict. And when I found out, I couldn't believe it, because that's not what we think, right? We have a picture in our mind of what addiction looks like. And you always think of somebody with hollow cheeks and really thin and unkempt. But over time, the truth became clear. His life was just unraveling. His family had to cut ties because he had lied and cheated and stolen from them just too many times. He would talk about getting help. He'd even, get ready and prep to go to rehab the next morning, and then he'd disappear. And because, he thought he could kick it on his own. And eventually, he died of an overdose. He looked strong on the outside, but inside, things were falling apart. Now, Jesus isn't saying that people are trees, but he is asking a hard question, and that is, what is your life producing? And that's where our scripture from Galatians, the first scripture that Dave read this morning, helps us. Because the Apostle Paul gives us language for what fruit actually looks like. This is the fruit of the Spirit. It's love and joy, peace, patience, kindness, gentleness, faithfulness, and self-control. That's the fruit of the Spirit. Not appearances, not activity, not busyness, but fruit. And Paul says that against such things there is no law. These things should be visible. They should be obvious. Which means most of the time it's not that hard to tell what is good and what isn't. Where it gets tricky is when something looks good, but it isn't producing any fruit. And that's where Jesus' words, harsh as they may sound, start to make sense. If a tree isn't producing fruit, then what is it doing there, right? What's it for? Now, let's be honest. Churches can fall into this same pattern. A church can have a building, a nice one with all sorts of toys and whistles and everything. It can have programs, it can have activities, it can have a long history in the community. People can say, oh, but that church there, oh yeah, it's been here forever. It's a legacy church. It's great. But the real question isn't, are we busy? Are we maintaining? Do we look healthy? The real question is, are we bearing fruit? Are our lives being changed? Do people feel safe and welcome? Is ministry actually happening? So let's bring this home then. This capital campaign that we launched last week, it's not about making the tree look better, okay? It's about making sure it can bear fruit. Yes, we have a lot of very practical things on the list of what we're going to do. Upgrading the HVAC system so that it doesn't nickel and dime us to death, so that people can gather in comfort. We're talking about improving security so that people feel safe here at worship and when there's activities here. Creating spaces that are more welcoming and hospitable. Caring for our grounds in ways that are responsible and sustainable. Those are real needs. But they're not the goal, right? They're the conditions that allow fruit to grow and continue to grow long after. Because when people come here, we want them to experiencing something real. Not just a nice building, but love, welcome, connection, and hope, right? And here's where Jesus takes this one step further. The disciples are amazed at what happened to the tree. But Jesus doesn't stay focused on that tree. He turns to them and says, if you have faith and do not doubt, even if you say to that mountain, be lifted up and thrown into the sea, it will be done. In other words, this isn't just about what's wrong, it's about what's possible. And that's where we are right now as a church. We can look around and at what we have. We can definitely name what needs attention. You know, we've got paint peeling here, and we've got things leaking here, and you know that we can definitely do that. We can even feel overwhelmed by all of that, and it's not hard to not feel overwhelmed. Or we can trust that God is able to do something more. Not someday, not somewhere else, right here, through us. So the question isn't just about building or budgets. The question is, do we want to be the kind of church that bears fruit for the years ahead? Because if our answer is yes, then this moment matters. What we do now matters. Because fruit just doesn't happen. It grows where people are willing to trust and to invest and to step forward in faith. And we trust that God is able to do something more. So this week, I invite you to reflect on this. What kind of fruit do I hope this church will bear in the years ahead? And how might God be calling me to help make that possible?